All right, welcome everyone. Thank you all so much for being here, joining the Labor Network for Sustainability panel discussion on disability in transit. My name is Carden Wyckoff. I am a disabled MARTA transit rider living in Midtown Atlanta, and I'm a car-free user. I'll be your host today, and alongside me is a wonderful number of esteemed panelists to share insights, challenges, myths, and explore solutions surrounding disability rights in transit, from debunking ableist misconceptions to addressing the challenges of rural transit, climate impact, and universal design. Our discussions will aim to foster awareness and drive positive change. And we really appreciate that you're here. So, what is the Labor Network for Sustainability? It's a nonprofit dedicated to be a relentless force for urgent science-based climate action by building a powerful labor climate movement to secure an ecological, sustainable, and an economically just future where everyone can make a living on this planet. And this week is Transit Equity Week. Our Transit Equity Day was on Monday, and the nation has been celebrating this week to champion and advocate for better transit, more equitable transit, especially in the disability community. And so this webinar is an extension of it. Just a few housekeeping items. Please make sure that everyone stays muted on this. This is being recorded, and this will also be streamed on the YouTube channel Labor for Sustainability. Captions are enabled, and you can view them as you go along. And we hope you really enjoy this discussion. So I'm going to kick it off with panelist introductions. If you all could just popcorn to the next person, let's start with Audrey.
Hi, I'm Audrey Sellers. I am wearing a pink dress and I have brown hair and I'm white. And I use she, her pronouns. I'm an advocate at Disability Rights Maryland. I'm from Baltimore. I'm a transit rider and activist and proud alumni of Transportation 101, which is a intro to transportation organizing kind of class that we offer here in Baltimore for free, run by Center for Central Maryland Transportation Alliance. Anyway, thank you for having me.
All right, Tanisha.
Awesome. Thank you, Carden. Hey, everyone. My name is Tanisha Sepulveda, and my pronouns are she, her. I'm from Seattle, Washington. Visual description is I'm a light-skinned Latina female, dark hair. I'm wearing glasses with my hair up, a beige shirt with a scarf-type neck, and I'm a power wheelchair user. So I use transit daily. I work with Disability Rights Washington through their Disability Mobility Initiative program, and I'm also with Empower Movement Washington. We're a BIPOC-led group of disabled advocates across Washington state, and we advocate for equitable transit and housing policies. Thank you.
Thanks, Tanisha. Zach.
Hi, I'm Zach at Disability Activism SF, and I'm wearing a blue shirt with my favorite gold tie, and I've got dark hair and some brown facial hair and light blocking glasses for my vision impairment. And I've got behind me, I'm white Caucasian, and behind me I've got a black and white photograph from the 1970s of disability activists blockading a Greyhound bus. And happy to be here. I am not affiliated directly with any organization, but I do advocate for myself and other disabled people to access all kinds of things here in the city of San Francisco. And one of those most important is, of course, transportation. And I am a power wheelchair user. I also have the vision disability, as I mentioned, and I also have hand and other chronic pain disabilities.
Thank you, Zach. And over to Anthony.
Thank you, Carden. My name is Anthony Lanzilotti. I'm from New Jersey. I'm a totally blind individual. Pronouns he, him. I have dark hair. I have on a, sorry, excuse me, that's my screen reader in the background. Gray shirt, with a matching tie, suit. Organizations I'm affiliated with are Philly Transit Riders Union, one of the co-chairs of the Trust, Transportation Riders of the U.S., president of the Delaware Valley Association of Rail Passengers, and proud card carrying member and a council member for New Jersey for the National Rail Passengers Association. Quality access to passenger rail and transit are the keys to my success. Thank you.
Thanks, Anthony. And as you heard, we have many panelists from all over the country, all different kinds of disabilities. So I think we have a really great diverse panelists here. So starting out with the first question, how can we dispel the myth that paratransit is a one-size-fits-all solution and address the diverse needs of individuals with disabilities? I'll take it over to Zach.
Thanks, Carden. I'll start off by just showing a picture of a paratransit bus. It's a white bus with 3 windows on it. It's like a miniature squished bus. And start off by explaining to folks who might not know what paratransit is. It is a secondary ride-sharing service that is offered in many cities to disabled people with people with special needs that has trained staff that help us board and take us to whatever our destination is. Some limitations of this service are, one is it's not integrated within the community, right? It is only for those with special needs. 2, it is a ride-sharing service. So that means if they pick me or someone else up and there's someone half an hour the other direction, sometimes that's where they go. And so your destination, you might be literally traveling the opposite direction of your destination. Other limitations include that you have to schedule your appointment at least 24 hours in advance. And then if you cancel within that 24-hour period, here in San Francisco, you are penalized. Or if you are do what's called a no-show, meaning that the paratransit operator shows up at your door or your hospital appointment, wherever, and if you're not ready to go outside, they can just leave and report you as a no-show. Here in San Francisco, they have a 3-strike rule. If you have 3 no-shows, you're kicked out of the program. And to give one example of why that's problematic, I don't actually have a wheelchair ramp where I live. There's no law that protects me to have wheelchair access even to my own apartment that I rent. And so like I've had a situation where I've literally been yelling, like, I'm up the steps, I need help. I have a bag with me. Can someone help me? And they don't hear me like over the traffic. So they just drove away and gave me a no-show. Stuff like that will happen. And so, yeah, we decided to start out with this topic because I think a lot of people are confused. Why do disabled people care about buses and light rails and trains transportation, mixed integrated transportation, when you already have your own specialized transportation? So that's sort of my take on it, but I know others have things to share as well.
Audrey or Anthony, did you have anything to add?
I would follow up. This is Anthony.
Go
I would
ahead.
follow up on what Zach said, and I mean, as Zach stated, it is a shared ride, paratransit. That said, there is no set amount of time that you will be on a bus, a vehicle, riding around here, there, and everywhere. And I can tell you, as a student, I've gotten pushback from college professors, and one can only imagine in an employment situation, you know, bosses are only going to put up with that for so long, regardless of whether it's your fault, the disabled person's fault or not. That's why quality access to transit is key, so that we can all live, work, and play and be productive members and contribute to society.
Hi, this is Audrey. So I want to rewind a little bit and define paratransit for those who are not familiar with it. Paratransit is a transportation service that supplements the larger public transit system by providing individualized rides, so rides for individuals, on a shared ride system without fixed routes or timetables like the fixed route system does. So fixed route is bus, metro, light rail, and paratransit is usually sedans or buses that can help transport people. They're required to have vehicles that are wheelchair accessible by both manual and powered chairs. Paratransit only is mandated to be provided within 3/4 of a mile of a fixed route. So let's say a bus line winds through the city, then only within 3/4 of a mile of that fixed route, of that bus route, would transportation be provided. Now, the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA, is what mandated paratransit to exist. Before the ADA, folks with disabilities were really totally left in the dark when it came to getting around. The ADA came and said, you have to provide an alternative that's equal to the service that people with disabilities, people without disabilities can get on the fixed route service. There has to be an alternative. You can't just leave people confined to their homes and unable to get around. Now, as I said, that has restrictions, and all of the problems that folks have talked about so far exist in many cities. Disability Rights Maryland, along with CARS, which is Consumers for Accessible Ride Services, a group of activists that we help to facilitate here at Disability Rights Maryland, have advocated for better paratransit and sued the Maryland Transit Administration a number of times to get that better service. I'll pass it off to Carden.
Yeah, thanks, Audrey, Zach, and Anthony for sharing that. I'll add just my own personal experience with paratransit in general is like in Atlanta, even though that I am a disabled person, like I use a wheelchair full time, I don't qualify for Atlanta's paratransit because I use the fixed buses and the fixed route buses and trains. So it's going to differ amongst various cities as well. So, you know, we heard with paratransit that it doesn't 100% fit the needs of every individual, and you have those limitations, like making sure that you're getting to jobs on time, and you have that three strike rule, Zach. So hopefully we dispelled some of the myths with that. So shifting into with transportation, we've seen really big shifts in the within the last decade, kind of that last mile transit for users. And we've seen dockless scooters, e-bikes, and even autonomous vehicles that have started to enter the market. So I want to know what's been your experience with these, and what should planners and inventors of this technology be mindful of when considering the disability community? Tanisha, you want to start with that?
Oh yeah. I also want to say that there is a request in the chat to read the chat out because it's not accessible to everybody. So I'm just going to read a couple of these that were mentioned from the previous, talking about the mobility services were originally created for access because buses weren't accessible, and that we need taxis, Ubers, etc. to be accessible, including chemical sensitive, but it costs about $50 per ride, average cost in fixed route services, from Zan Thornton. And then yeah, Tony had mentioned that a friend qualifies for paratransit, but because she is outside one of the counties that serves, even though she is within the city, she doesn't qualify. But yeah, a lot of great mentions in the chat here. But as far as the dock list, for me. In Seattle, I haven't really seen, or it hasn't really reached too far as like level 5 type autonomous vehicles, the ones that are just completely on their own going around. But what we do have a lot of issues with in the city is the scooters, the land bikes being left in places that are just simply in the middle of the sidewalk, creating obstructions for the people who need to use them. So me being a power wheelchair user, sidewalks are my like main way to get around. My chair basically is, and outside of that, it's the bus. And so when those become another obstacle on top of already trying to maneuver around, our sidewalk system that is definitely not perfect and needs many fixes in many places, it just creates more of a problem. And I know like a lot of the responsibility, because there are areas where there is, parking and things like that for these types of vehicles, but people still will leave them right in the middle of even curb cuts and make it impossible for someone like me to be able to get around. So that's definitely been my experience with them, not to mention like the countless injuries that they cause for people on average. But yeah, outside of that, there definitely needs to be a better system in my opinion. Thank you.
Thanks, Tanisha. Yeah, I definitely feel that. I mean, as I can't even pick up one of those scooters or e-bikes when they fall over, and they fall over for a number of reasons, like maybe the wind or the rain, or someone just, topples it over another and lays it down. It doesn't dock it correctly. So it becomes an obstruction. Zach, can you speak about autonomous vehicles and with San Francisco?
Yes, would love to. Also, wanted to share, describe the visual aids that I've been showing, just a couple while Audrey was speaking. One is a picture of two scooters collapsed in the middle of a sidewalk between two poles. It's the title of an article, picture below a title of an article. It says thousands of new e-scooters hit San Francisco streets today. And the other is a report from the San Francisco Standard, which says that scooter injuries, which by the way, often means people developing new disabilities, jumped from 145 to 454 from 2020 to 2022. And deaths involving scooters went from 0 between 2017 and 2019 to 7 between 2020 and 2022. And so, yes, there are some challenges to overcome. And I wanted to also voice that I don't think any of us are against having more options. As one person said in the community, they're a tool in the tool belt. It's just that when they are going to replace or work against publicly available options, or if they have, as Audrey mentioned, numerous access barriers. I have a little presentation that I prepared with an advertisement for robot cars, robocars as I call them. And this is a very telling advertisement that highlights disabled people. I'm first going to give a visual description of it for our blind and low vision community. It is an interview with a woman describing her experiences of transit and her excitement for autonomous vehicles. And it starts with her putting on some makeup and then her going around San Francisco and actually boarding a bus here in the rain. And then it goes on to her in a assembly shop, like a design shop for cruise vehicles. And then it shows a couple other members from the community, including a blind person of color and a couple other folks with different disabilities using their robo vehicles. So I'm going to show that clip, and then I'm going to explain a little bit of, I'm going to dissect it a little bit together and explain a little bit more about it. And so the title card says, "Something I've Dreamed About." An accessibility spotlight brought to you by Cruise.
anywhere, independently. To not have to ask somebody to give me a ride or wait for the bus, to not rely on any rideshare to not pick me up because I have a wheelchair. As soon as I heard that Cruise is a self-driving car company working on a wheelchair-accessible vehicle, I was like, sign me up. Nothing about us without us. Imagining a future where the wheelchair-accessible Cruise car comes and takes me where I want to go is the dream come true.
And that's just a segment of a series of ads that have been run here in San Francisco and around the world through YouTube, promoting driverless vehicles by, in my opinion, exploiting disabled voices. So let's break this down. Why is this ad, which seems like a very good thing, problematic? In my opinion. For starters, you'll notice that when this woman is going to board a bus, it's painted in a negative light. It's also shown the bus system in the rain on a cloudy day and with no interaction with people. And including the bus driver themselves, their face is not even shown in this clip. It's all darkness. And so it's this very impersonal experience of a bus, which is in fact, of course, way more sociable and way more personable than a driverless robot car where there's no human whatsoever. In contrast, it shows this person going to the factory or the assembly design warehouse of General Motors, which is the parent company of Cruise, interacting with all these people for this new prototype, which of course she'll never get to interact with once these are actually on the road. And everything is bright and colorful. I also think it's really interesting that they've got this LGBTQ pride flag, even though General Motors is actually infamous for being a pride supporting company that has actually donated over $1 million in anti-trans and anti-LGBTQ legislation. So there's a little bit of hypocrisy in that. And lastly, you'll notice that in this, they really gloss over the fact that she has the smartphone, the pocket computer set up, right? That she's got the hand dexterity and the ability to do the digital payment system, to have the GPS and the app installed and everything ready to go. And of course, the privacy, consent to privacy violations that we basically have to do to use these applications and these services. Another thing very much worth pointing out is that Uber has been fighting against disability rights activists to deny our right to accessible transportation. And in fact, in October, I'm showing a screenshot right now that says the appeals court backs Uber in wheelchair users' disability lawsuit. And Uber said that cities have, quote, scant wheelchair accessible vehicle supply, so we don't have to provide equal access to disabled people. So what does that mean? Well, it means that this commercial that you're seeing is for a vehicle that might not even make it to market. And even if it does, they can have it be, quote, scant supply, and the courts will back them up. So how many of these accessible vehicles would we even get? There's absolutely no mention of the cost of these vehicles. And of course, there is no mention of the harm that they have caused. So I'm showing a couple screenshots here. CBS News, 11 more people killed in crashes involving autonomous automated tech vehicles. Tech website, Waymo self-driving car killed a dog in, quote, unavoidable accident. By the way, it's a Waymo spokesperson that said the accident was unavoidable. Self-driving Uber car kills pedestrian in Arizona. Driver hits woman in SF. Then Cruise driverless car runs her over. Photo shows victim trapped. Report, Tesla autopilot involved in 736 crashes since 2019. And Tesla recalls over 2 million cars due to autopilot concerns. This was done with a very quick Google search and does not even come close to all of the problems that these robot cars and vehicles have caused for our community and the danger and new disabilities that they have created in our community. And it is very much in line, this idea that robot cars will fix everything, we don't like she says in that ad, she's talking about issues of discrimination and having to ask for help. And rather than address the cultural issues of that and have conversations in our community, what Cruise and General Motors is really putting forward here is the idea of techno-ableism, which is a growing movement, or not a growing movement, but a growing problem. And then I wanted to highlight this book by Ashley Shu called Against Techno-Ableism, Rethinking Who Needs Improvement. And it's a cool resource, a really cool book. She's also got some podcasts for those out there that want to like just audibly listen, because this all ties into this idea that technology will save us, when in fact, buses and mass transportation have been around for a long time. And if they are given love and attention and funding, will include everyone. And last but not least, will make things affordable. There's no mention in this ad of how much that specialized wheelchair autonomous thing will cost. And of course, there's no mention of any person there to help her, the person in the ad, if they get stuck on that ramp, if they're like me and they have a bag that they're bringing that they can't lift, right? If they have a health problem while they're in the vehicle. These are questions that I have for these companies. How are they going to solve those? And what worries me also greatly is when there is a problem, like in the case of the dog that was run over, does a company spokesperson get to decide whether something was unavoidable or not? But that's my share for this, and would love to hear from other folks.
Thank you, Zach, for that great presentation, and just showcasing some of the issues with autonomous vehicles. And wheelchair accessible Uber is not in Atlanta, so I can't just call an Uber and get anywhere that I want to be. So I feel that. Anthony, could you speak to the accessibility of the apps of these dockless scooters, e-bikes, and autonomous cars?
That's a good, thank you, Carden. And that's a great point. I don't know. No, to date, I haven't had a chance to really test the apps out, and that's a growing problem. Prior to implementation of these vehicles, I think that needs to be factored in, having a block of time to actually test these apps out for accessibility. So as of now, it's still accessibility. How accessible, it's not known.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's go to the next question, which is talking about rural transit challenges. So how can we advocate for improved infrastructure, sidewalks, and reduce car dependency for disabled people? Tanisha, you have family in the rural area. What's your experience like?
Yeah, so for me, having family that lives almost 2 hours away or 2 hours north, cross county transit, I think anywhere is probably not great, and especially here in the city or in the county of King County, it's pretty fluid. We have a lot of good connecting bus lines, definitely room for improvement, but compared to once you move outside of the county and get into more of the rural areas, the trips become, the bus frequency becomes 1 hour, maybe every hour. And this is coming from someone who's used to, every 15 or 30 minutes, another bus is coming. And then, if you miss that bus, not only are you off the road of a highway somewhere, there's maybe a gas station, but now you have to wait another hour or hour and a half plus for another bus to come. And then that's going to delay the next bus and the next however far over. And so especially with, Uber and Lyft and all of these other services not being accessible, and the only other thing to rely on is yellow cab, and that can become extremely expensive. Transit is the main option, and that's why it should be connected and it should be extensive to the point where, I could go see my family and it wouldn't be a big issue. Yeah, so it's just, there needs to be more proper shelters in those areas, better lighting for sure, safety issues because you're literally on the shoulder of the road. And then also, just improving that bus frequency time. I think, yeah, that could make a world of difference.
I like the solution-oriented mindset there you got, Tanisha. All right, Audrey, did you have family in the rural area as well, right? Do you want to share your experience?
Yeah, I actually grew up in a town of 462 people. So, and having a mobility disability myself, I have a form of muscular dystrophy. I know how difficult getting around can be. Here in Maryland, in Eastern and Western Maryland, it's mainly rural. And along with that, it's largely car dependent. There's, like Tanisha was talking about, there's little range and frequency of service, of fixed route service, and because of that, Anthony will explain how that impacts paratransit. Some of the solutions for this are accessible microtransit. And protected bike lanes. We were talking about microtransit a little bit ago when we were talking about scooters, e-bikes, etc. This can provide a good first mile, last mile solution meaning it can help get you to a fixed route stop and get you from a fixed route stop to your destination. Now there's a lot of complications with that, but it is an option for rural areas to increase their travelability. Another option for trying to advocate for better transit in rural areas is to collaborate with your local Center for Independent Living. Centers for Independent Living are federally designated organizations that the purpose of them is to help people with disabilities in the counties in which they operate to become as independent as possible and live as self-directed lives as possible. So they do a lot of advocacy along with that. You can call your local Center for Independent Living, tell them that you are the challenges that you're having with transportation. They can help link you up with other folks who are having those same challenges to advocate together. You can sit on a local a council for your local transportation system. There are sometimes committees of folks with disabilities who are specifically consulted on transit operations and planning. You can go to your city council. There are many problems with rural transit. Another of which is the difficulties with non-emergency medical transportation, or NEMT, which is basically Medicaid transportation. People who have Medicaid or medical assistance can be eligible for transportation to and from their medical appointments. But NEMT doesn't connect county to county. They go as far as the county boundaries, and then you have no way to get to your doctor's appointment or get to the next county after that if you're traveling across several. Non-emergency medical transportation also has a tendency to bounce people back to their locally operated transit system and say, take paratransit, you're not eligible. So there's a lot of problems with non-emergency medical transportation, but in order to make them better, you have to speak up and organize. Unfortunately, that's what we're left with as people with disabilities.
Thanks,
So
Audrey.
exercise your voice.
Yeah, the power of rising up.
Yeah.
Anthony, you live within a mile, right, of a service area. What can you walk us through your experiences getting to the service?
Sure. So if I'm going to use in New Jersey, it's called Access Link. Access Link is the ADA complimentary paratransit. If I catch the fixed route, which is NJ Transit, the fixed route bus, it's over a mile. It's more like a mile and a half. So, and as an individual who's totally blind and a cane traveler, you know, again, as stated previously, the lack of availability of sidewalks. So many times you're going into well, where there are sidewalks, you're going to encounter obstacles. Some people are in and half out of their driveways, vehicles, pickup trucks, etc. Or you're forced to go into the street and then to find a trail and then find an area where there is a sidewalk to get back up in the which could be oncoming traffic, which presents another danger.
Many challenges. What do you think helps you the most, Anthony?
Having resources, I utilize everything. Meaning, I seldom use Access Link. I'm mostly fixed route, bus, rail, light rail. I use it all.
All right. So shifting out of rural transportation challenges, let's shift into climate. So how can transit systems meet the needs of both climate and people with disabilities? Tanisha.
So for me, where transit and climate intersect, I mean, it's a lot, obviously, but I'd say the best shift would be less car dependency. Because then, you know, we're working on cutting our carbon emissions and also creating systems that are more accessible for more people across socioeconomic points that can now have better access to opportunities. And also as far as, you know, as far as getting to that point, I feel like, again, you know, putting funding into fixing our transit systems, especially when you see a lot of funding going into either, you know, autonomous vehicles, and especially going into electric vehicles, which are also seen as, you know, being very green and better for the environment, but it's still pushing towards that car dependency. And those are, you know, incredibly unaffordable for some people, most people probably, not to mention a plethora of other climate issues that they actually cause because of what goes into the batteries and the fact that you can't recycle the batteries. And the fact that they also burn hotter fires somewhere water is needed to be able to put them out if they catch fire on the highway or something. And so nonetheless, obviously shifting away from those issues and just becoming, you know, using our transit more, putting more education out so people aren't like afraid of transit. Because I know, you know, if you live in a rural area or having spoke to people who have, it can become a little daunting. It can seem a little intimidating learning the bus system. And I know when I moved back to Washington from Arkansas, I had no idea how to use the bus system at all. And even as an able-bodied person then, it was still very like overwhelming and a little bit daunting, but you catch on. But there could definitely be better education, you know, educating people on how it is important. It can improve climate, it can reduce costs at the same time. And then also, yeah, getting more transit out there and working on connecting our systems better.
Thanks. Anthony, what would you say is one of the downsides to everything turning into electric vehicles for you?
Sorry, the availability to hear, because now all these electric vehicles they're becoming quieter and quieter. Then that's a challenge right there. So you're not sure if is it a bus approaching, is it a car, what is it? So I think to combat that universal sound. Some sort.
Thanks. Sorry, I think my Zoom kind of paused for a second. It glitched out. And Zach, can you share your experience?
With what?
Oh, sorry, with just sustainability, climate, and you know, actioning for cleaner transportation systems.
Yeah. Well, so what I've seen here in San Francisco is I mean, I'm in Silicon Valley, tech boom central here, right? And so the money the tech money pours in here, like it's wow. And part of that is there's a lot of tax breaks and tax incentives that local politicians give big tech companies. They don't give those tax breaks or tax incentives or extra budgeting to public services, right? A lot of that is going to the private sector. And we actually have a really nice unionized bus system. And it's been the sort of unofficial goal for some time by local politicians to crush that union. They do not like the fact that transit workers are unionized, that they can negotiate for fair rights and good contracts. And so in that battle, we are seeing the gutting of our local bus systems in favor of Uber, Lyft, Waymo, and Cruise, as well as the sidewalk scooters. And every day I talk to people about this, it's more and more people that are not using the public services, the bus and the light rail and the train. And more people are opting for Uber and Lyft until Uber and Lyft has a larger share of the economy, and then they bump up their prices. And it's all private. What are you going to do about it? Meanwhile, of course, they're infamous for worker rights violations and very low wages for workers. I had a roommate who worked for Uber, and he had to wake up at 4 a.m. and start his shift at the airport because that was the only way he could make enough money for rent. And, you know, it's a gig economy. So you don't have, healthcare, dental care, all sorts of stuff like that. So you contrast that with the public transportation system, right? And you think about how many cars are going around the city as I speak right now, polluting the city when it could be better buses. Our buses are actually already partly electric. We have power lines over many of the streets, and it have been for decades. And so it doesn't take like a rocket scientist to see that that is much better for the environment, and it's better for the community. I have so many cool stories of cool people I've met on the bus, and I've made art on the bus. I've done photography and songwriting on the bus. There are so many communal benefits, which I think is also a part of public health as well.
Thanks all for sharing your experiences with that. So I noticed a few names on the call who work in planning for safer streets and work under, Department of Transportations and help to promote Vision Zero principles and have cities adopt those. So in the context of pedestrian safety, Audrey, can you talk us through how we can create safer streets for the disabled community?
Sure. With due respect to the folks who may know more about this, I want to explain first what Complete Streets is. So Complete Streets is a set of policies, can support a set of policies that that make streets, roads, roadways to be as accessible as possible. There's this idea of universal design and versus ADA accessibility. ADA accessibility is just the group of standards that that something needs to meet in order to be legally accessible. And universal design is design and practice that takes into account the needs of all users, whether that be a parent with a baby carriage or a person using a wheelchair who needs to navigate their area. So ways to a lot of jurisdictions across the country have implemented complete streets policies, and by implement I actually mean adopt, because complete streets policies and the implementation of that has to be measured, and it can be measured by the in part by the ADA coordinator of your county. or of your local transportation system. And ADA coordinators' responsibilities include self-evaluation. So any public entity, a public entity of any size that has an ADA coordinator needs to review its services, its policies, and its practices to determine if they are really meeting the standards made by the Americans with Disabilities Act. And if a complete streets policy is implemented, then by that complete streets policy. A strong complete streets measurement tool is public and it's recurring. It sets a timeline for meeting certain goals, like reducing crashes and severity of injuries, reducing the number of inaccessible curbs, measuring emergency vehicle response times, and the number of students who walk or bike to school can be a good indicator. Bike route connections, these are all things that you want to look for when you're looking at a complete streets policy. But the main part of that is that it's public and it's available for comment, which we can all do.
Thanks, Audrey. And I think with Complete Streets also, it's ensuring that the disabled voice is included in those decisions. Showing up and doing community meetings and giving your experiences in that. With Complete Streets, we often see, dedicated bus lanes get added, as well as floating bus stops. And so ensuring that those floating bus stops are accessible. I've been to some places where those floating bus stops are inaccessible, but usually when you have that conversion to a complete street, it definitely takes into account a more universal design approach. And speaking of like universal design and ADA standards, wanted to know, what should planners be striving for to ensure that universal access on buses and trains? And I see we have a lot of hands up. I don't know if those questions are specific to the topics we've covered, or if it's later. We will have a Q&A towards maybe after this question, we could take some questions. So regarding just prioritizing universal design over ADA, Zach, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, I also wanted to make a quick note. Are we if we can read back the chat? I got a couple requests for that first.
Oh, sure. Yeah, we could do that. The chat is very busy, so sorry, I'm not really paying attention to it. I don't know how far back we're going, but I'm seeing things like the disability community being left out of transportation and design. E-cars are a problem. Earlier we were talking about not having a real person to talk to if there's a problem. Surge pricing, which also impacts the disability community. Contra Costa County is doing a statewide 1-seat rides. Michelle, I think there was something around, if you're able to take fixed route, then you don't need paratransit. Yeah, I think it's different for every person. And then a lot of other links to different stuff. So Zach, do you want to answer the question about, the difference between ADA standards and universal design as it relates to transportation?
Yeah. Are you asking for me to talk about the litigation I was involved in?
Yeah, that's a great story to talk
Okay.
about.
Yeah, let me share. I have a little clip, which is actually from last year's Transit Equity Day. And it's a little montage of my experience getting on the bus before the litigation. So take a look.
Please sit down. wheelchair on, please? The wheelchair is supposed to go on first.
I know, but the thing is, I got elderly people, I got disabled people, and it's really crowded.
Hi, I'd like to get on the bus, please. Could you please put down the ramp and ask people to move? You didn't even pull up to the curb all the way.
But you're gonna have to catch the one behind me. I gotta stand them low.
Just trying to get on the bus. You're the third bus. You're the third bus I've been waiting for. Just because I'm disabled doesn't mean I don't need to get home. I'm just trying to go home.
To tell us what you'd like us to consider.
Hi, my name is Zach Karnazes. Dear SFMTA Executive Board, I'm addressing you here today as a wheelchair user and San Francisco resident who has struggled for years with discrimination, ableism, and abuse from your staff and from uni drivers. It is not uncommon for wheelchair users to have to wait for 3 or 4 buses every single day at the same stop just to get home or to get to the doctor. I want to really encourage MOD and the council members to look into the unbelievable discrimination and ableism that is happening with San Francisco MTA, Municipal Transit Authority. They recently canceled all 4 of my upcoming ADA hearings while I was awaiting response for reasonable disability accommodations.
So I'll stop there. There's a little bit more, but I think you can get the gist. By the way, for our blind and low vision folks, that was a series of clips of me trying to board buses and being denied access, usually by the bus operator. And the last 2 clips were me at San Francisco City Hall, addressing the stuffed shirts about it and sort of doing they already knew this problem exists, but sort of putting it in their face a little more, so they can't pretend like they don't know it exists. And so this is how I actually became a transit activist. It wasn't like a dream of mine. It was something just out of necessity for me to go to the doctor, to be in my community, to see my friends, to do music performances because I'm a performing artist. And as Anthony mentioned earlier, like if you work or have, we have lives. There's this kind of assumption that disabled people are, I don't know, just not living life and doing things. And we're just as active as many other members in the community. And so we rely on this transportation. And through the course of fighting for my rights, I actually spent years doing what you see in the videos there. By the way, all of those are available on my YouTube channel, which I'll show at the end here. But I spent years doing this stuff, going to every meeting you could possibly think of, the Mayor's Office on Disability, the Multimodal Accessibility Advisory Committee. How's that for a mouthful? The Executive Board of the Municipal Transit Agency, which is one of the clips that you saw there. I even hand-delivered like memos to them describing the discrimination. I would do public records requests for bus footage from the cameras that are installed on the buses. Which, by the way, are very good at catching kids doing graffiti. But when there's a disability violation, the footage mysteriously gets deleted very quickly. And so that became a battle in this as well, is the retaining of that public footage when there are access violations. And a very interesting thing happened in this process, which was that I noticed the city was really trying to blame the union. They're saying, you know what? It's really the bus operator's fault. They're not picking you up. Bad bus operator. And I was like, oh, I mean, yeah, that's a problem. But like, are they getting training? It's clear to me that this is like a system-wide thing. It's not just like 1 or 2 bus drivers, bus operators. And so I would go to these ADA hearings, these very inaccessible, very problematic ADA hearings. And the so-called neutral judge of these hearings would literally create an argument for the bus operator, saying things like, oh, you closed your doors because you didn't see the wheelchair. Is that right? I'm not even exaggerating. They would say stuff like that. And so what was really interesting, though, is there was one union representative, and keep in mind, as a disabled person, you're there alone against a judge who is really working for the city and siding against you, the operator who discriminated against you, and the union representative for the operator. So you're alone with 3 people against you. And they're not afraid to cut you off and bully you. But I had a very interesting hearing where the union representative spoke out and said, you know what? We're not getting the trainings that are in our contract. Huh, very interesting. I ended up speaking to the union about this, and through some help with the Transit Riders Union here in San Francisco, got in touch with the head of Local 250A at the time, a wonderful man named Roger Marenko, who is the president of the Transit Operators Union. And we sat down to lunch, and I showed him the videos that I just shared here today. And to his amazing credit, he sought to fix the problem right away. He wanted to know immediately which buses were causing the problems so he could talk to workers, and immediately started working with me so that I could advocate for our community, and basically, you know, describing the things like they were supposed to get 8 hours of training a year in their contract. They were getting 0. They have 400 hours of trainings for new operators. Only 1 hour of that was going to disability training. Of that 1 hour, no disabled people were involved. We weren't even, it was a non-disabled person saying, treat disabled people kindly. And actually I saw parts of that presentation, and it was all about who you're not supposed to board, not the positive version of that. So anyway, these things did not get better. They got worse over time, and eventually was forced to file a lawsuit against the city. Fought that lawsuit for a couple of years, and I'm happy to report that there is a very successful settlement with the city. And some people with the agency, I do have to thank, actually came to the table, and I think were able to hear me for the first time, able to hear our community for the first time without all the red tape and, you know, bureaucratic nonsense. And so I'll share just a couple of the successes from that, which are great. And like, this is all just one option, right? Like, litigation is my least favorite thing in the world, pretty much. And it's certainly not our only option. But if you go to my website, I've got the full text of the settlement and more information on the story. And then also these links to the new web pages that were created during this lawsuit, including web pages now that describe the hearing process, what your rights are, how to make an accessibility complaint. Before this lawsuit, these were just called customer service complaints, which is ridiculous because they're discrimination. Links and information to the Accessible Services Coordinator under the ADA. If you have a government agency with 50 or more employees, you have to, by law, have an accessibility coordinator. That is the person to contact, by the way, when you're fighting for your rights. Make sure you address the ADA coordinator. And, you know, a whole new accessibility page here as well. And so that's in addition to improvements in training, improvements to all sorts of things. And I made it a very specific point of mine to get away from the punishment penalty mechanism that was in place for operators, because I feel very strongly that it's through positive reinforcement that we can change the old attitudes, as activist Ed Roberts said, and fight for our dignity and our equal access to our community. And then lastly, this is my YouTube page where you can go and watch these videos, as well as many other videos about environmental activism I do, disability rights activism, and there's also a collection of hard to find disability documentaries and civil rights struggles. And I'll stop there.
Zach, you're such a great model of activism, and I mean, what you experience is awful, right? It's just one of countless stories that happened accessing transportation, but also just, you know, being a disabled person and being discriminated against in the built environment and transportation and work, housing, et cetera. The list goes on. And, you know, I thank you for all that you've done to improve San Francisco. You know, look at all those great accomplishments that have come out of it, but it didn't happen without a hard fight and a many-year-long process fight. So, you know, it's wonderful to speak alongside you. Audrey, I don't know if you have any other information to add on top of that to just universal access and the difference between ADA standards.
Yeah, I think that the way to prioritize or help prioritize universal design over ADA standards, and even just meeting ADA standards, because sometimes that is the lowest bar that people need to reach and people aren't quite at it, is inclusive transportation planning, inclusive transit planning. So, and that is bringing people with disabilities into the conversation from the jump, not before the transit agency or not after the transit agency has come up with a plan and release that for public comment. Inclusive transit planning is consulting them before a plan is even developed. And that's all I have to say about that.
Thank you. Tanisha, anything around that?
Yeah, actually, kind of just going back to a comment from way earlier, well, like 15 minutes ago, but like way earlier. Connie had mentioned how the disabled or the disability community is, being left out of transportation access because of design and built environment. And that is one of the many, well, actually, probably one of the primary reasons my other job, my primary job, I work in architecture, and I did that because I saw the lack of accessibility in our built environment and in the design, and the fact that so many obstacles are created simply by the way things are designed and made by other people, right? It was built that way without thought, and people with disabilities are it's an afterthought, like, oh, should we make that? Even now, even with ADA standards, there's plenty of buildings here, stores that are put in where, there's not even an accessible button to get in. Plenty of even big name stores, Starbucks of all places, and that's like the least, as Audrey was saying, the lowest bar is ADA. And some people can't even make that. So I feel like, a big reason to shift towards universal design, or at least start implementing some of the standards that would be helpful as far as making sure that, sidewalks are wide enough so people can cross, making sure that the barriers to certain sidewalks, some being a big issue out here in Washington and Seattle, is the fact that sidewalk maintenance is responsibility of the property owner. And so if there's overgrown hedges and bushes coming onto the sidewalk and you're not able to access that, then the property owner needs to handle that, or it becomes a whole thing. And a lot of people don't have the energy to deal with all that litigation and activism, and that takes a lot of time and work and energy to do all of that. And so, if all of these things could be implemented from the beginning, and like Audrey was saying, as far as having, people with disabilities being included in the planning process from start to end, not just in the beginning, not just consulted in the middle, but to constantly keep coming back, with the new ideas to make sure that they're still in line with the needs of the community as a whole. And so, other things that are great as far as transportation would go, at bus stops, having, of course, always making sure that there's Braille, always making sure that things can be read out. There are some that have buttons that have audio descriptions of when the bus is coming, as well as visual timetables for the buses. Making sure that there's proper lighting, making sure that there's shelter, making sure that the shelter is close to the bus pole. So many times, and especially living out in here in Seattle, when it's raining, people will be at the shelter, which is 20 feet away from the pole. The bus driver, it gets dark in the winter at like 4:30 here. And so the bus driver will drive, be looking at the pole, see nobody there. You can see someone in the shelter, and they just speed by as that person's attempting to get up. So just taking all of those into mind when designing, when planning, when getting these things into play, because the bottom line comes down to, if you do it now, it's cheaper. If you have to retrofit and reconstruct, it's going to be way more. So it's really better for everybody to just start where we're meeting the needs of, the most crucial community that's, the most overlooked, and then that will benefit everybody else who uses those. Yeah, me too.
Universal design, the way to go. And then kind of final question around the actual bus experience. So, you're traversing down the sidewalk, or you're waiting at a bus stop. Those usually start with the sidewalk, or you're at a bus station. But what is that experience like? Do you feel that you're supported when you're on the bus and you're being tied down properly? Do you feel secure and safe for those that use wheelchairs? Zach, do you want to take that?
Oh, that's directed towards me. Yeah, I think, I don't know if I would be the best person for that question, because I use a power chair that doesn't need to be tied down. But I've definitely heard that there are a lot of issues with that. And as I mentioned before, the trainings that are not consistent. So some drivers will be like, hey, do you need to be tied down? Some don't ask at all. And there's definitely been very serious injuries from disabled people, including there was actually one of the attorneys that helped me with my case, wonderful attorney named David Geffen, worked on a lawsuit in Los Angeles where a person died because their wheelchair was not secured. And so one thing I really want to speak to with litigation, the news media goes to great lengths to make us look like we're money grubbing, con artists or something. And so they'll be like, oh, $1 million lawsuit, for disabled people in Los Angeles because they were complaining about the bus. And of course, it always failed to mention that somebody died, Of course, when they talk about my lawsuit, they're not going to mention the 4 years of unpaid work I did to try to get on the bus, right? So that's sort of my take on it, but I'd love to hear from other folks too that have had more direct personal experience.
Yeah, I know with Atlanta, at least when I board the bus, no one, I would say it's like a 50% of the time they ask, do you want straps? Do you want to be tied down? And I, of course, always say yes, just because on the bus, like you're turning and whatnot, and you're going to slide regardless. It seems I saw in the chat, Tanisha, you said you want it tied down as well. I know we see a lot of hands coming up, so I just want to finally, for the panelists, if you want to give 30 seconds of what final words would you leave listeners with, and we'll get to some questions.
Hi, this is Audrey. So as my last words, I just want to kind of highlight the terrific work that CARS, Consumers for Accessible Ride Services, has done in conjunction with Disability Rights Maryland. We've seen a lot of problems with paratransit. We've seen poor driver training, poor training on certification processes, poor on-time performance, people not being picked up, people being left places stranded all night. Poor customer service, but this doesn't need to be the status quo. People with disabilities should be not just consulted, but they should be lead decision makers in the transit planning process. Some other options for improving service are to help advocate for the workers and the drivers to get better working conditions, fully equipped vehicles, get data from your transit system so they're accountable, and get regular meetings with your transit system so you can enforce that accountability. In order to change things, make a public comment, organize, consider litigation, make a complaint to your locally operated transit system, make a complaint to their customer service, make a complaint to your city's ADA coordinator, and make a complaint to the Federal Transit Administration. And last but certainly not least, don't be afraid to contact your policymakers because they want to hear from you.
Thanks, Audrey. Tanisha.
Yeah, thank you. Honestly, everything Audrey said, definitely don't be afraid to speak out, complain, get your voice heard, reach out to your policymakers. But also if that's not really your vibe, not really the way you go, maybe reach out to someone who can, who has, who wants to speak up more and reach out and do all of the work. Because it's not always easy, and it's like, yeah, there's a lot of stigma that comes with it, and especially like the idea of, seeming like someone who complains, or, that being casted upon the disabled community, even though we have every reason, and every right, and it's very valid. So definitely don't be afraid, because there's big community around here that's totally willing to support. And yeah, I'll leave my information in the chat as well. I just think, especially for the people planning and making the decisions, one thing that I always say is like, the disabled community is the only minority that anybody can join at any time. I was able-bodied before and kind of had no idea. And then I broke my neck and resulted in a wheelchair. And so here we are, and you really realize, like, and everything is precious. And so designing things to make it in a way where we can all access and enjoy them as a community, as, as family, as friends, as neighbors, then let's start doing that, because, that's really the most sustainable idea for long term. Thank you.
Thanks, Tanisha. Zach.
Oh man, so articulate. Yeah, with everything Audrey and Tanisha said, I'll add on a couple of things. One, public records requests. In this country, and especially here in California, we have great public records laws. And I thought I was sort of, not that many people were getting passed up by the bus, maybe a few of us. I did a public records request and found thousands of ADA complaints from people all across the city of all disability types being passed up. So public records requests is a way to exercise your rights. I especially want to highlight what Audrey said about disabled people being a part of the decision-making process all the way through. And I want to say that we need to move beyond this idea of the stakeholder, the individual stakeholder, or 2 or 3 people that represent a community, and move towards the town hall, the open public comment, where everyone can speak and give their input. And as far as things that we can do, everything that Tanisha and Audrey said is right on point. Don't be afraid to speak up and stick up for your rights. One thing I found is that that motivated me is I realized that all my suffering was invisible, and that the people hurting me were getting away with it because I wasn't putting it in writing and I wasn't speaking up. And so if we want things to change, we have to put things in writing. We have to speak up. And as I mentioned earlier, the magic words are ADA coordinator. Whenever you're going to make a complaint, ask for the ADA coordinator and make your complaint to that person, because then it's on record, and it is on record as a disability violation. And if you make enough of those, start calling the lawyers. If you're not getting the changes you want to see from policymakers, we have activists, lawyers in our community that for decades have stood up for our rights as well. And I'll actually post in the chat a great resource for finding disability attorneys. But obviously, that's just one tool in the tool belt. What we really need is the mass social movement and social change within our communities, right? And really getting people to see the humanity in us. And as Tanisha said, you can join this club anytime. What I say is disability is the coolest club you never wanted to be a part of.
Exactly. Yeah, exercising your right is always a good thing. And then finally, Anthony, and I want to save a little bit of time for questions for the last 10 minutes. So, Anthony. Anthony, you still
Wow.
there?
Sorry, I
Oh,
was
there we
muted.
go. All good.
Wow, so articulate. Everyone said, um, there's power in numbers, and don't be afraid to speak up and speak out. Be persistent and don't give up. And do all the above: the records, the right to know requests, the open requests, ask for the ADA coordinators. I had to file suit on an unrelated issue, but involving access, but unrelated to what we're discussing now. So I can relate to everything that Zach went through personally. I get it. It's not fun, but it's something that needs to be done when all else fails. And yeah, don't give up. And one thing we've been stressing is universal design, universal access. We as disabled members of the community, we don't have an access. We don't have a seat at the table. We don't have a voice. That's the problem, and we need to change that.
Thanks, Anthony. Well, just a huge round of applause to all the panelists. Thank you so much for sharing your, being vulnerable and sharing your expertise and your own personal stories navigating transit in your own communities. And there's so many resources shared. If you want to get in touch with any of them, they'll leave their information in the chat. So we'll start with questions, starting with Sherry. You had your hand raised. I sent you the notification to unmute. Hey, Sherry.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Hi.
Oh, thank you. Hi. I have really appreciated hearing from all the panelists and the insight and the presentations. But what I wanted to ask is, and I think someone, one of the panelists did speak on it, and that's what's from the policy side. Perhaps if it hasn't been done already, and I would like to know if anyone has done it already, found out which of your policy makers either have disabilities or have family members that are in wheelchairs, because it's not information that's hard to find. And I think those may be some advocates that can help move this ball down the football field at a swifter pace. Has anyone tried that?
Zach? Yeah, do you want to go ahead?
I can speak a little bit to that, but you might not like what I have to say about it. I approached some policymakers here at City Hall. Here in San Francisco, like a lot of cities, we have a thing called corruption. And I actually approached someone in the Board of Supervisors. I had a contact with one of the aides, and I said, check out these videos. Like, this is what's happening with the buses, and I love that you're my district supervisor, and like, how can I support you? Can you speak up for these issues? And the response I got was very sobering response. And it was the exact kind of response you would get from a disingenuous politician, in my opinion. And he said, find 20 other people, to form a group with, right? Make some noise, basically, get in the news, right? And then we can sort of take it on. Which was a really sobering and heartbreaking experience for me, because it made me realize how much, at least here, our politicians do not lead. They are followers. They're followers of community movements, and they are responding to pressures from the community rather than leading the community. And that's because our politicians have become a lot like our corporations, which is to say they are very risk adverse. They don't want to lose votes. They don't want to alienate their funders. And so in the case of disability rights, we don't have like corporate backers, right? We don't have people sort of on our side, because changes to access are expensive, which means construction lobbyists are often against us, which means anything in housing development is often against us because it's not seen as a thing that's good for the world and the community. Often it's seen as dollars and cents. So that was my experience. I would love to hear some more positive experiences from people. But my experience has been to work within the community to build momentum and then approach your policymaker, unless you have a really nice policymaker.
I think that's been my experience too, Zach, is work locally with the community, with nonprofits and advocacy groups, and then bubble it up because you have more support that way. Okay, let's get to another question. Other people have been waiting. Connie, I'll ask to unmute. There you go.
Hi, thank you very much. My name is Connie Arnold. I live in Elk Grove, California. I'm a power wheelchair user. I've been an advocate for disability rights for over 35 years. I wanted to hear Zach on this presentation today because I knew it would be valuable. I've been involved when ADAPT was American Disabled for a Public Transit today, and that's going back to the 80s when we had to chain ourselves to buses and conferences of big associations like American Public Transportation Association. And there's a couple things that probably need to happen is people need to be willing to get back out to the streets because that does make a difference. That's what passed us Section 504 in the 70s that got us got signed so that anybody receiving federal funding has to provide accessibility, whether it's access to buildings or programmatic access or access to public transit. The problem is that some of these organizations like Uber and Lyft, they have a lot of transit dollars and they're millions of dollars to donate to political campaigns to, stop legislation and to obstruct accessibility. And what Zach alluded to was that, like, for instance, the building industry is not in favor of accessibility. So their associations are often working with the division of the state architect on making sure that anything that would improve access or that would be good for accessibility continues to be watered down. We have the strongest accessibility compared to other states in the ADA, which is Title 24 California Accessibility Regulations. So, I really feel that one of the things that needs to happen is people need to be aware. We need to start voicing our need for a governor's committee on persons with disabilities so that the organizations will have to come to the committee, the state agencies will have to send representatives, and we can talk about addressing the issues like public transit issues like Uber and Lyft in a fashion that would actually get the attention of making real change, that and taking to the streets if necessary. And it's very hard to do that when people are living in different places. We're isolated from one another. People have limited incomes. They don't have resources. And it's when people are struggling in their day-to-day life, that's a difficult situation. I'd like to hear from anybody that wants to provide any feedback on what is their thinking in terms of, this new bullet train is coming out. They're making designs, and again, we're being left out. So I see across the board on transit, we're being left with paratransit and we're being cut out, whether it's EV transportation or EV, even electric vehicle charging stations that could charge wheelchairs and power chairs, and why power chairs aren't even incorporating the newer technology with long range batteries. I mean, these are important conversations. I'm sure you can't cover it all, but I bring up Kendra Mueller's name because she was trying to gather some advocates together to address some of these issues related to our train that's going to get us 200 miles an hour down to LA really fast here in California and all across the country. Billions of dollars are pouring into these entities, and our voices aren't at the table as they design. We're an afterthought.
Thank you, Connie. I think you raised a lot of really great points. And these, I don't think any of us really have solutions to all of them right now, but yeah, I appreciate you sharing your comments and your experience. We're gonna keep going on to the next. We have one more hand raised, Tony.
Hi, I'm in Wisconsin, and they are finally trying to get things a little better. It was a bit of a hot mess here for a really long time. But I just was trying to go into the aspect of like the things were mentioned, like with the trains, for example. They are trying to figure out for us, like how wheelchair users or just people in general that take the bus, for example, could, easier access the trains, because where I'm at here in Wisconsin, our station is on the north side of town. Totally fine, the bus goes over there, but it doesn't stop in front of the station, so you still have to walk a couple blocks to go. So if you don't have a car, you don't have somebody to give you a ride, or you're in a wheelchair or whatever the situation may be, you still got to go farther. And they said, well, it's kind of in a weird spot because it's a dead end. And so it's like, well, so I totally get that. But I just wanted to ask, like somebody was saying, like talk to your ADA, what was it, like advisors and different things like that. What if some of the people that are supposed to be advocates for that are maybe not the best person for the job? Like who else can we go above? Because I'm on a group in my town for paratransit for our area, and we're trying to make changes and slowly doing that. But the guy that runs it, he doesn't have a disability, and he tries to run things, but we really had to almost break ourselves and butt heads with this guy before things really were going and the wheels were in motion, so to speak, because he would hear what we had to say, but it was like, well, we're not going to do that, or we're whatever, like ask our opinion, but basically I don't care, until we got the transit manager involved. But, what do you do then if they supposedly want your opinion, but then are like, yeah, that's not going to happen. So just, I gave up opening my mouth after a while with him, because he just acted like he wanted to hear, but then would be like, if that's not going to happen, quit bringing it up, like he has ultimate say and he doesn't. So suggestions when we run into situations like that, whatever the case may be, for accessibility, for reference point, I do use a wheelchair, but it's not full time. I had meningitis in 2010 and I have fatigue issues, so sometimes I need my chair. Otherwise, I'm fortunate I can still get around with a cane or a walker and a bike on good days. But, most of the time it's unpredictable, so I'm fortunate. But I wish people that butt heads with us could experience disability, because they would rather not if they could, even for an hour. So.
Thank you, Tony, for sharing your personal experience, and sorry that you're having, I personally haven't had an experience with the ADA coordinator not being the right fit. I don't know any other panelists of you. Zach, maybe you've encountered that a lot. So you approached that by getting good lawyers, it sounds like, right?
Yeah, so I just want to say that's an excellent question, Tony. The ADA coordinator is something designated by law to handle your complaint. And so my emphasis is merely to notify them. They're required to sort of work with you, right? But sometimes they'll just stonewall you. In the case of Berkeley, there's a ADA coordinator. I'm going to call him out because he is a total scumbag. His name is Gregory Thomas. And I don't care who hears it. Screw Gregory Thomas. He's a super ableist scumbag that would not let low-income housing email disabled people for when they're going to be removed off the list. Even though I told him I don't have wheelchair access to my mailbox. And so you'll real scumbags will be ADA coordinators a lot of the time. And the trick is to not waste your energy. when you reach an obstacle like that, to refocus your energies elsewhere, be it if there's a union you can contact, workers that you can contact, if there's a different admin or a different manager that you feel like might be sympathetic, if there's a protest you can stage. Public embarrassment is one of our most powerful tools. I started posting videos on YouTube, and that got people's attention because it looks bad, right? Because it is bad. And then lastly, another tool in the tool belt, of course, if all else fails, start talking to attorneys and showing them those communications. Hopefully you have them in writing. I always communicate with ADA coordinators in writing. And you can say, look, here's my emails back and forth, and they're just stonewalling me on this accommodation. Last thing I'll say about that is under the law, under Title 24 of the ADA, by the way, this is a 34-year-old law. We need something better. I want to point out, as Tanisha mentioned, the ADA is the lowest bar. The ADA also did not include blind folks in large part. And so it is a very low bar. But one of the things that's in the law that does protect us is it says a reasonable disability accommodation must be made unless it is a financial or administrative burden. So sometimes you can get the ADA coordinator's attention by saying, yo, what's the financial or administrative burden here? Because that's you basically winking to them, being like, I'm prepared to talk to lawyers if you keep stonewalling me. I want to know your explanation legally why you're refusing me access. Hopefully that helps.
Thanks, Zach. And I saw Connie posted some good links. First, the adacoordinators.org. Looks like you could contact them and reach out if needed. Additionally, you could always take it to Secretary Pete and the U.S. Secretary of Department of Transportation is another opportunity to bubble up requests. All right. With that, I think we will close out this webinar and panel. Thank you everyone so much for attending. Thank you panelists. Follow us.
Could we read back the chat one last time? There was also one question
sure.
from Thea Shelby that
My apologies.
I was hoping in the chat that I was hoping we could answer.
Yeah, can you read it for me? I don't know.
Yeah. So from Thea Shelby, 1247, can someone explain why disabled people are not qualified for paratransit if they take the bus, the light rail, or the train? Doesn't make sense as taking both reduces the burden on paratransit. Obviously, I'm missing something.
I don't know personally the answer. I just know that it comes down to the agencies. Like in Atlanta, they've made the decision that, disabled users that can use the regular fixed routes don't qualify. So it seems to be, and this changes with every jurisdiction.
Yeah, the requirement of the ADA is that paratransit is available to people who are unable to take fixed route or get to a fixed route stop or get from a fixed route stop or wait for fixed route, etc. Basically unable to use it. So it's up to the transit agency, and they can extend eligibility to people who are able to ride fixed route or not.
Great, thank you. It's also a lot of really great resources. I think a lot of people share their own personal information. We will have all of this recorded, and it'll be also streamed on the YouTube channel as well. So again, thank you everyone for coming, and hope you have a great rest of your week.
Carden, sorry. For those of us that want to stay on, I wouldn't mind staying because I actually had till 2, and I don't mind staying on till 2 if you want to make one of the panelists a co-host or the host.
Yeah, sure. I can make you. I think you're a co-host, Zach.
Oh, okay, cool.
Zach, can you keep an eye out for anybody who would like a copy of the chat?
Sure.
Okay.
I just got a pop-up that says there's an AI companion turned on for this meeting. Does anyone know what that's about?
I think it's for a summary.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so I should just click OK.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, thanks. If anyone wants to stay on, feel free to do that. For anyone else, Hope you have a great weekend.
Thanks, Carden. Great job hosting.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thanks for having.
Bye.
So I'd like to read back the chat. I know we had a couple of requests for that, and then go on to any other questions if that works. Does that work for everyone?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I'll start at 12:56 p.m. because that's when I think we last read it back. Michelle Rossi said that they've had it happen too many times. I think they're referring to not qualifying for paratransit. Mark says, and this is on SF Muni, which is only a handful of systems that had accessible buses before the DAD mandated them. Tony says, wow, unbelievable, exclamation mark. And Bin says, thank you, Zach, for sharing these scenes. Michelle says, yep, just to live a normal life, we have to educate others. Michelle also says, I have paratransit too, but ride fixed route, they use more. Tony said, that's my situation as well. Connie posted a couple links. Happening in February 8th, 2024, National Council on Disability is holding a meeting for public input on Uber and Lyft. And then Michelle said, I was on that in Alameda County like 10 years ago. There's a lot. Yeah, this is actually a lot to, if I'm going to read through all this, it might take a long time. Does anyone have any thoughts or want me to keep reading? I can do it. I just don't want everyone to leave while I'm reading this long chat.
This is Sherry. I have a suggestion. Some of those folks may be gone, so maybe you can just take questions from those of us who are still left here. I'm
Okay.
here. I'm here.
Or how about we can email the chat to folks? If any, post in the chat or speak up audibly if you would like the chat emailed to you, and that way we can
Yes,
include you.
please.
Zach,
I
I
put my
would like to
email
chat
in the
in.
chat.
Yeah, I put my email in the chat also. My question is, if I may, I wanted to ask a question.
Yeah, I think we had Tony's hand first,
Great.
and then you'll be next, Sherry, and then Michelle. If that sounds all right. Did you have something, Tony, or was your hand
Yeah, I
still
just
up?
didn't know if you were ready for me or not. Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I just was going to say a few things. So with what was being discussed with like the situation with like the people that were supposed to be ADA like advocates, I just wanted to clarify that the issue with the person that I've been having problems with once in a while, he actually like he's in charge of the ADA committee, but they essentially like gave him this job after he had health issues so he could keep his job. He's not a specialist by any means. That's why I wasn't sure how to really address that, because I've tried to talk to his boss a little bit when we've had problems. We all have, and he tries to deal with it, but at the same time, it's like, you know, sometimes they do stuff about it, sometimes they don't, but he's kind of got this arrogant attitude at times, or it's like, well, if you don't like it, you don't have to be here, which is actually not true because we got voted into the group. You know, it's not like we just got to be there. So I just wanted to clarify that. And also, I don't know if you saw in the chat, Zach, I can put you in touch with my friend, but I didn't know like what email I should have her contact you about the tactile map. Because I can get in touch with her later, and I just didn't know, because I didn't get a response, how she should get in touch with you. She worked on it with her kids, and it's awesome. It's pretty cool what they did.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. For those, if it's okay if I share with the group,
Yeah.
your friend made a 3D printed tactile map
Yeah.
for navigating transit. I put my email in the chat a couple times. I
Okay.
can post it again if you didn't
I
see
see
it.
it now. Maybe I just missed it because there was a lot going on, and I, you know, maybe it just went over me, but I'll make sure she gets that. Thank you.
Sure. Sherry, I think you were next.
Yes, thank you for taking my question. This has been very informative. I've had to use a walker and cane due to severe sciatic nerve, and also because I needed to have hip replacement surgery. I had to have knee replacement surgery, all of that. So I can kind of see all of this from a different lens. Those were temporary situations where many on this call is not a temporary situation. So I do what I can as far as equity advocacy, and have done some with MARTA and in the cities I've lived in across the country. However, what I put in the chat was, why can't we start our own mobility, paratransit, and microtransit companies? Wonder Woman and Superman are not coming. What I've found is in a lot of the minority communities here, if you're in Atlanta on Buford Highway, they've started their own system to supplement the number 3 Buford Highway bus. And the number 3 Buford Highway bus in Atlanta is the number 1 bus in volume usage across the entire MARTA system. I live on the route that is the 2nd highest volume. So all I'm asking is that while we're doing these other things with policy, there may be some things regarding ownership that we can do ourselves to create microtransit, paratransit companies. Sometimes it can start with 1 van. It could start with 2 vans. You know, what can we do ourselves to help remedy this problem while we're trying to get politicians to do it? That's my question.
So my answer might not be totally satisfying, but it's just a part of the overall answer here. So I think Section 5310 funds from the Federal Transit Administration are available to help fund stuff like that. Unfortunately, you do have to partner with the transit agency or the state. So there is that barrier. And then you basically like subcontract under that or do it in partnership. But Section 5310 funds are where some of that money can come from to start something and run it.
I don't have a problem with that solution because, you know, the journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step. And maybe along the way, work with policy makers to change that if that's what's needed. If we don't like it, we need to change it.
I have a response as well, but wanted to see if Tanisha or Anthony had anything to add.
I don't have too much to add in that area.
Anthony, did you want to respond to Sherry's question at all?
No, nothing here. That everything's well put.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'll respond just briefly. So we, there's definitely, I'm a big fan of ad hoc community solutions, even ones that don't go through like department approval or whatever. We actually, I've seen really funny here, on New Year's, the buses have gotten so crowded that they'll actually like tilt back and forth, just packed to maximum capacity. I remember one year there was a smart person that had like a little truck and they drove next to the bus saying like, hey, I'll give you rides for like a couple of bucks or whatever, you know? And so I love community solutions like that. One of the big challenges that I share with people a lot is that, I mean, that makes us very different from a lot of other minority or minoritized populations, is that we are disabled, right? We're sick, we're injured. We can't just like, oh yeah, let's just go do it ourselves. Like that is actually one of the huge barriers for our activism. And it's actually why we experience a lot of discrimination in activist spaces. Because it's like, oh, go to the protest, you know, go march for 2 hours and hold up a picket sign. Like I can't do that, you know? And so one of the things I find myself frequently inviting people who are not disabled yet is to help advocate for us. You do not have to be injured or disabled to stick up for disabled rights. If you're not injured or disabled and you want to go rent a van to help us travel in our communities, like, hell yeah, you know? And I think sometimes we suffer from this siloing of marginalized identity, which is, I think, very much part of the divide and conquer strategy, where, oh no, I can't celebrate Martin Luther King Day because I'm white, you know, or oh no, I can't help disabled rights because I'm not disabled, you know, or oh, I can't, you know, speak up for feminism because I'm male, right? Like these archaic, siloed, segregated stereotypes, I think don't help us. And I think the way that we are going to move forward in our civil rights and our human rights is all of us looking out for each other in all the different types of discrimination we experience.
So Zach, I want to just add this really quickly. I think that there are more able-bodied people out there who would help if they knew how to help. In the community where I live in, I did some work. I saw Deborah Scott on the call earlier. I did some transit work for Georgia Stand Up for MARTA. And she called me and told me that the people over on Camelton Road called and they've been complaining. They've been looking for sidewalks. They've been trying to get sidewalks for 40 years. I go, that doesn't sound right. So I looked into it. They have been trying to get sidewalks for 40 years for a 1 mile, actually 9/10 of a mile stretch along a major thoroughfare here. And so 18 to 20 months later, we got our sidewalks, you guys. So I'm not an expert. It didn't take 40 years, but I found out what was needed. And so now the folks in wheelchairs don't have to stay at home when it rains because the rain, the drainage is so bad that they can't, you know, they can't they can't get through the water when it rains. So now they have the lifts, they have the sidewalks, the baby strollers, everybody has. So you're right. But I think that if more people knew, they would advocate and help you. So I think what we need to do is both things. Still try to get policymakers to do what they do. Another thing that I did was I'm working with a group here, the Georgia Coalition for the People's Agenda, to help people get rights to the vote, to vote. And I said, okay, how many handicap accessible vans do you have? And they said, none. I said, what? So what I did for them was I started calling all the churches and asking them if we could use their handicap accessible vans. It was the first time, you guys, that had ever been done. So there were plenty of rides to the polls, but not for disabled people. I am not a rocket scientist, you guys. So just think, if in your cities, you said, okay, church A, church B, you know, 2 of the churches told me, I said, okay, what are your requirements to do this? They said they would provide a driver and the bus, and we didn't have to pay for gas. Oh my God. The other one said, you have to supply the driver. They need to have their driver's license. We're going to make sure they know how to operate the lift and they can come and get it. We will pay for the gas. Wow. So sometimes we have to know who to ask and what questions to ask. So I think that there is more solution here that we can do with using the example from what the folks did on Future Highway. They want more rapid service, but they supplement it. So we can supplement. And also over here in the English Avenue, Vine City area, somebody got 4 electric cars and started giving people rides to the grocery store. Okay, why can't we figure out how to get 1 or 2 vans and do a circular within certain communities and give disabled folks rides to the doctor, rides to the grocery store? Come on. We can do this, guys, while we wait on our elected officials.
Amazing share, amazing story. Thank you, Sherry. Does any other panelists want to respond?
Yeah, round of applause for Sherry, because that's amazing. Really appreciate your passion and like devotion to getting that done, and yeah, helping out your fellow neighbors.
And we also got some lips. We got more lips done for wheelchairs. You know, you get off one lip on the sidewalk and then there's not one on the other side. Well, we dealt with that throughout the corridor. You know, that was a little extra something. And of course, when I went to the city council meetings initially, they say, Sherry, we don't have money for sidewalks. I said, that's not my question. I didn't ask you how much money you have for sidewalks. I want to know what the process is to get sidewalks. So once I knew the process, we got them.
That's beautiful. Can I ask if you have any videos or like, you know, footage to share of this story? I'd love to put it on my YouTube channel. I think it's exactly the kind of thing that people need to know about for problem solving. Do you have any like videos of you like speaking to folks about this or anything?
I don't, but Georgia's Stand Up probably has some video on some things similar to this. I think that there's advocacy organizations in every municipality, if we search them out, that will, you know, just like I was just trying to help people get rides to the polls, and then I found out they weren't helping everybody get to rides to the polls. So I don't, but in the future, I hope to have some. But I'm all about trying to get what we need to get from those who have the power to get it. And when they don't, we need to figure out how to use the rules and laws for ourselves.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's beautiful. And yeah, I've just been finding that if you're already doing something amazing like that, that the story of it can be equally or even more powerful for social change. So these days I've got the camcorder with me every time I go to City Hall. Every time I'm doing stuff in the community, I take out the phone and record. That's amazing. I will say one example in Berkeley, there's a guy named John Benson who basically worked for years advocating with the city of Berkeley to create a ride sharing service a ride service called Easy Does It. And he created that himself. It's expanded now. It has some funding. But they actually fix and repair people's wheelchairs as well. Yeah. And it was, but it was, at least here, it's a battle. Like it's a battle. There's a lot of red tape and bureaucracy. But that's one, they haven't successfully done it in San Francisco, but in Berkeley they did it. And I actually got a wheelchair from him some years ago. We have just a couple minutes left. Any other closing remarks or questions from anyone?
Thank you for coming.
Thank you guys. This is informative.
Thank you for having this.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
This has been a really cool, engaged audience too. It's so cool to see the chat just blowing up like that.
Oh yeah.
Just love it. Love it.
Enjoy that. Sorry.
No, you go, Tanisha.
I was gonna say everyone enjoy their day. I don't know who's in what time zone, but you know.
Oh yeah, Bobby, you have something?
Yeah, so my name is Bobby Joe Chavarria, she, her. I'm in Fontana, California. I am the new senior field organizer with the Sierra Club for Clean Transportation for All. And I just really want to commend this conversation and all of you advocates and folks who have had to advocate and champion for yourself and for others. And it really opened my eyes to many of the challenges. I am new to the club as well, to the Sierra Club, but also to the Disability Club. And yeah, there's so much that you don't think about until you experience it. And so you all being generous with your time and sharing your stories is much appreciated. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bobby.
It's wonderful. Yeah, wonderful to hear. Wonderful to hear. Yeah, and thanks so much to Labor for Sustainability for hosting this, making this all possible.
Absolutely.
Bakari on the back end support.
Woo woo, Bakari.
Yeah, show them some love too. If you liked this conversation, maybe we could do it again next year as well.
All right, I gotta hop off. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Have a great
everyone.
week.
Bye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.